Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alumni Chats, a weekly podcast featuring alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon, and I'm the host of the podcast. Today, I'm talking with Cisco Cotto from the class of 1998. Cisco, good to see you. You look like you haven't aged one bit.
It seems like so long ago whenever I hear that, 1998. Has it been that long? I guess it has.
Well, I think when you have stopped in many times to Lee Hall and you fit right in.
Yeah, well, what's funny is every time I'm on campus, I look at the students and I sort of fool myself into thinking if I put a WIU sweatshirt on, I could blend right in. I know that's not the case at all, but I'd still like to think so.
Okay, Cisco, let's find out what's going on in your life and where you are. What do you want to tell us about?
I'm a news anchor, the midday news anchor on WBBM News Radio in Chicago. I also host the WBBM Noon Business Hour. So for 4 hours of my day, Monday through Friday, I'm anchoring the news, sort of playing quarterback where you're introducing the traffic and the weather and the business. You're introducing reporters as they're doing stories and also monitoring the clock to make sure that everything is going on time in the all news station, the news wheel, and keeping to it is very, very important. And so I do that for 4 hours of my shift. And then for that 1 hour, I host the business hour, which is just great fun because I've learned a lot. I get to help other people learn a lot as we talk about business and the markets, but also a lot of consumer oriented stories.
Nice. Well, let's take everybody back to the beginnings because I think you're from Aurora. Is that right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so I always like to kind of find out what kind of things may have shaped you, impacted you early on, family, community, friends, those kind of things. What kind of things were shaping you early on and may after a time of reflection that you say, these things were really big impacts on my life?
Well, I know, especially from a broadcasting standpoint, I never forget the day I was at Aurora Christian High School, which is where I went to school. And during an assembly, the broadcaster for the Kane County Cougars, which is a local minor league team, came to speak to us. And I remember thinking, hey, that guy does what Harry Carey does.
Yeah.
Growing up as a big Cubs fan, I said, that guy does what Harry Carey does. Let me go talk to him. And I was at the time, let me see here, I was 15 years old. And I walked up to him and I introduced myself and he just sort of stopped in his tracks and said, you have an amazing voice. And at that point, at age 15, you think you sound like Peter Brady or Screech or something. There's just nothing at all on my radar about any kind of a voice. And so I was really surprised. And the guy was just really kind. His name was Michael King. And he said, I want to take you to the ballpark and let you see what I do. I also do some part-time work at a radio station in Chicago called WMBI. I want to bring you down to the radio station and show you what I do. He got me an internship at that radio station. And that was, no question, that was the turning point in my life that led me to fall in love with radio, led me to know really, and I mean this, even at that young age, I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then that's why I was at WIU, because I already knew by the time I got on campus that this is what I wanted to do.
That's amazing that somebody early on saw that potential in you and sort of gave you that word of encouragement. How do you think your parents reacted when you said that was something that you wanted to do?
They thought I was a little crazy. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think they were hoping for a lawyer instead of radio broadcaster. Of course, now I look back at my high school transcript and I know I was never really on the lawyer track. I think they were a little skittish about it. But one of the, and I know we'll talk about the career in a little bit, but one of the reasons that I think they came to understand it and appreciate it is because I was really blessed to be able to get a job in Chicago right away so they could hear me on the radio. And then that let them understand, there really is something going on here.
So as you said, you went to Aurora Christian High School. And then how did you make your way to WIU and decide, obviously, were you looking for a broadcasting program?
I was looking for a broadcasting program, but I was looking for a program that allowed me to sort of get my hands on the equipment early on. I looked at the University of Illinois, obviously, really great school. And yet, because of the size of it, I'd have been probably a junior before I actually got to use any of the equipment and do any broadcasting. And my best friend from high school had a brother-in-law who went to Western. He was a chemistry major there. And he said, "Hey, let's go visit my brother-in-law. Let's go hang out at Western Illinois." And so we came down for a long weekend, and I got to see the broadcasting department and talk with some people and see, oh, wait, right away you get to use the equipment and get experience. And that won me over right away. In fact, we applied before we left Macomb from that trip. And we ended up coming there together and rooming together, and that was a great experience too. But that was the thing that really sold me on WIU from the beginning is, wow, you don't have to wait in line in order to get practical experience. And I assume that's still the way that it is now, but that was what attracted me back in the 90s to WIU.
Yeah. Whoever that person is, I want to send them a thank you card, first of all, because that's a great way to luck into you. So when you got here, what were some of the first things you remember getting involved with over in Salee?
Yeah, I was involved right away, actually, over in Henninger Hall with a radio station that's not around anymore.
WHEN.
Yeah, I was there. This is probably about 2 years ago. I was there and I went to the basement of Henninger Hall just to see, what's there. And they made it into these wonderful student study areas. And yet one of the things I appreciate is they didn't remove the on-air light from above what was the studio door.
Really?
WHEN radio. And so I was able to snap a picture of that and send it to my friends who were at WIU and worked at the radio station. Said it's like we're still kind of here, sort of. But I was living in Henninger Hall, and so I saw that WHEN radio was there and right away got involved in that. And really loved it. Loved being able to work alongside other students, to do DJ work and talk shows. And it was then a little bit later that I started doing things in Salee Hall, specifically on the TV side, as I really wrestled between, do I want to do radio? Do I want to do TV? And I ended up doing much more radio when I was in Macomb. And yet I also enjoyed doing TV too, and kind of feeling that out.
And one of the great opportunities for our students is a connection with Tri-States Public Radio, WIUM. And how did you get involved with WIUM? Did you have to apply? Do you remember that process?
Yeah, I had to apply. I had to get some recommendations, met with the news director, a man named Tim Crowley at the time.
Yep.
Who's been a longtime public radio figure, even once he moved out of Macomb. And it was an opportunity that Tri-States Public Radio created specifically for students to be able to get them involved and to get experience for them. What I appreciated about Tri-States Public Radio is the fact that not only do they embrace using students, but they really saw it as an opportunity to mentor students, to give them, again, that hands-on experience that's so important in broadcasting. I was covering city council meetings. I was doing feature stories in town. They really gave me great opportunities. And in addition to the reporting, I also got to run the board and sort of host some of their programs. And so that was, I don't even think at the time I appreciated what a great opportunity that was. In radio, I tell students this all the time. It's also the same with TV. This is like art. Someone can tell you how to draw, they can show you how to draw, but until you're actually drawing, you're not going to learn the ins and outs and what to do and what not to do and the certain techniques. And so you really do need to be able to actually broadcast. And so WIUM, what a great situation to be in right away when I got to WIU.
Yeah, one of the skills that you learn early on as a reporter is trying to call people up on the telephone to get information, or the face-to-face encounter of trying to be as professional as you can be as a student, and yet still trying to figure out, am I talking to the right person? How do I approach them? There's a lot of things early on that I'm sure you were learning that helped you later on in your life as a news reporter in a much larger market, right?
Absolutely. How to get that interview, and the difference in getting an interview with a public official who's used to giving an interview and expects that as part of their job, and someone who's maybe running a local business or is involved in a news story, and someone who may be more hesitant to give an interview. You really do. I almost wish that there was a textbook or something on this, but it's so nuanced. You really have to do it in order to figure it out. How do you get a public official to give you the answer that you want? And by that I mean to answer the question that you're really asking, because there are times that they will pivot and will say anything but give you an answer to your question. And then how to make someone who's not used to giving an interview feel comfortable. You really have to come in a very gentle way, an understanding way, to make them feel comfortable so that they know that they can talk to you. You're not going to make them look foolish. You're not there to trick them. You really just want to get to the story. And one of the things that's been really effective in that is showing people, I want to make sure your side of the story is told and not just this other side of the story. And when people understand that, they're usually more willing to do an interview.
And all the folks at Tri-States have been so wonderful about accepting our students, but they really, I think, kept a very tight ship because they were seen for their importance within this region, not only with news, but with other forms of entertainment, what they were bringing in. And do you recall some of the people that you were, besides Tim, that you worked with over there?
I worked very briefly with Rich Egger, who's still there after all of these years. So Tim was the original news director. I worked with him, and then I worked with Rich Egger, who's the current, again, longtime news director. The person who's the station manager at the time was Dory Valillo, who was just wonderful, had such a passion for broadcasting in the region. So the news directors were my direct reports. And yet there were all these other people who had other jobs in the radio station that worked together and really did make it feel like a family, which was also a nice thing to be a part of.
So what other memories do you have of Salee Hall? Because I think in that period of time in the late 90s, there were so many really strong, talented students that you were working with, as you said, whether it was with radio, but also with television. I think some very talented people. What do you remember of that period of time?
Yeah, I remember the especially around the TV newscasts, the great important experience of the deadline of all of us running around, chickens with our heads cut off, trying to get everything done, that last piece of video, that last graphic, the mic check, everything to get it all in place. And then getting to the end of the newscast and this feeling of relief. We actually did it. It may not have been perfect. We may have made some mistakes. We're just students, but we actually got it done. And there was this feeling like we're all in this together.
Yeah.
We're all working together, playing our role, trying to get this done. And then we actually did it. And so later on, you'd get people around campus that would say, hey, aren't you on that TV show? Aren't you on that campus TV show? And it made you feel like, wow, so people are actually paying attention to what we're doing. We're actually providing a service to the campus community. And it's not just a bunch of students in a studio in a control room playing around. There are actually people who are getting some information from us. So I enjoyed that experience. Two people I remember in particular, and there are lots of them that I actually have stayed friends with, but I remember Devin Lucy, who actually got a great weather gig in Tulsa right out of Western.
Yeah.
He's in Utah now, having served in some big markets. Sarah Simmons, who is just now out of as a longtime primetime anchor in Washington, D.C. Those were classmates of mine that we hung out with and we were friends. And to see them have really great TV careers has been pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, some of our professors at that period of time, I'm sure Sharon Evans was involved with TV news, and Roger Sadler, Sam Edsel probably involved in the newscast. And so they're all helping to also shape you a little bit along the way, weren't they?
Yeah, there's little tips. Again, as a student, I don't even know that you grasp it all right away.
Yeah.
You think, oh, this is a professor who wants me to get a project done, and you're thinking about it more like an academic exercise. And what the professors are really doing is because they have an understanding of what it's going to take in the real world, that is the professional broadcasting world. They understand what it's going to take to be successful. And so without always saying, okay, I'm going to tell you to do this because it's going to help you get your first job and keep your first job and get your fourth and fifth job, they are giving you those pointers because they understand what it's going to take. And so me getting an opportunity to start out in Chicago, that's not lost on me. That's been a fantastic blessing for many years. But the reason why I was able to do that is because of the guidance from the professors and being able to work out so many of the bugs in the classroom and on the stations in Macomb. And so that it just helped prepare me. It made me ready. I didn't even realize it at the time, but it really did.
Some of the other things you're doing during your time as a WIU student, you worked over WBYS in Canton, right? And also you're involved with INBA, which I think were also things that help prepare you for your future career.
Yeah, WBYS was a weekend radio gig that I got. It was sort of funny. At WIU, I certainly had my share of fun, but while most of my friends were out on the weekends having fun, I was in a radio studio 45 minutes away in Canton, Illinois, running the board for Cardinals games, and I'm a Cubs fan. I was there doing newscasts and playing commercials and doing all of this stuff in order to try to get experience.
Right.
And so during the week, I was doing things in Macomb. On the weekends, I was in Canton. That was a great radio station with some great people, kind of learning what it's like to actually be in commercial radio, to work for local ownership. That was really great. And even though, yes, it was 45 minutes each way and I missed out on some fun, that again helped me to prepare and work out some of the bugs so that I was better prepared to get into the real broadcasting world. INBA, the Illinois News Broadcasters Association, just can't overstate the impact of INBA in getting me started in my career. For people who aren't familiar with it, I know a lot of WIU students are involved even still today.
Yeah.
But for those not aware, INBA is a group of news broadcasting professionals, both radio, TV, and digital, who gather together for conferences, to collaborate, to offer tips, to bring in great speakers. And for students, it's an amazing networking opportunity because the people at INBA actually want to get to know the students and want to mentor the students. And so I was able at INBA to meet a man named Bob Roberts, who's now retired, who was a longtime Chicago radio reporter. And I was going for an interview for a radio station, WMAQ. I was going to interview for an internship. And I'm sitting in the lobby and I'm all nervous, I'm in my sort of, my suit and everything and trying to get it all together before this interview. And wouldn't you know, Bob Roberts walks by and he goes, "Cisco, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'm interviewing for an internship." Oh, that's fantastic. We'd love to have you here. Goes into the boss's office. "I know this kid from INBA. He's great. You should let him have the internship, blah, blah, blah." And I thought, if that's not a testimony for the importance of networking in an organization like INBA, I don't know what is, because I got that internship. Later on that summer, they hired me for a full-time job. And then I've been in Chicago ever since for more than 20 years. And that INBA connection was a huge help.
That's like sinking a 2-inch putt. You walk up and you're just like, that's a tap in. And that was perfect. But that wasn't just your only opportunity, right? You had another internship possibility in Chicago, which is amazing to me. I didn't know this.
Yeah, I had station WLS, which interestingly enough, I would go on later to work in. But WLS had offered an internship. But this is where I advise students, weigh your options and think about it, because at WLS, they were a union radio station. And most of the stations in town are union. But that would mean that I couldn't go on the air unless I was part of the union. And as an intern, I wouldn't be part of the union. At the time, WMAQ, which is no longer around, they're 670 The Score now. They're a sports format now. They were not union. And so I thought, hey, I at least have the opportunity to go on the air here. Maybe that'll never happen, but I at least have the opportunity. And so that's why when I had the two internships, I chose WMAQ. And sure enough, throughout the summer, there were opportunities. Hey, can you record this and we'll put it into overnights, or we'll put it on the weekends? And hey, why don't you write this story? And
Mhm.
why don't you and all of that opportunity really culminated in, as an intern, there being a fire at a downtown hotel, the Allerton Hotel. All of our other reporters were out somewhere else. Here I am, the intern in the radio station. And our news director, Mike Krauser, throws a cell phone at me. That was before everyone had cell phones, by the way. Just so you know, that was a treat to actually have a cell phone. Mike Krauser throws a cell phone at me and goes, "Kid, there's a fire at the Allerton Hotel. Don't screw it up." And I ran out the door, ran to the Allerton Hotel, nervously sort of held up the phone and did this live shot. And apparently it worked out okay. They ended up hiring me. But that's just the difference in union and non-union if you're an intern.
And I think that everything that you have talked about in your path from high school up to this point is strategic moves on your part to try to prepare you for where you wanted to be. I mean, you had this goal, which I think that our young people can really benefit from hearing, that when you have a goal and this is where you want to work towards, make some decisions along the way that will help prepare you. As you did, you wanted to get experience right away, in radio. You wanted to get some commercial experience and you sacrificed your time. And now here it is, you're making this internship decision that eventually leads to your first job in Chicago. And I hope that our students that are watching this realize this isn't normal. So did you have to pinch yourself a little bit to say, and I'm sure you did realize what a huge benefit this was for you?
I'm going to be honest with you, and this sounds totally bad, but at first I didn't realize it. And the reason is because growing up in Aurora, Chicago was always the radio I listened to.
Yeah.
It was just like home. And so I could have started out in market number 100, and it would have felt more like I was starting out in a big market, because I would have had to leave. I would have had to get to know the place. I would have had to meet people in the community. And so that would have been much more overwhelming to me. But because I started out in Chicago, I knew where all the expressways were. I knew where City Hall was. There was just less of a transition. And it was probably about 2 years into it when I was at an event with other reporters. I can't even remember what it was, some story that we were covering. And a guy who was working for one of the news services was talking to me, and he was asking my story. So you could tell I was young. And he goes, "So what are you doing? How'd you get this job?" And I said, "Well, I went to Western and I did an internship, and they just kind of hired me." And he got all mad and literally started swearing at me. And I thought, what is this guy's problem? And the issue was, he had been trying to get a job like this for several years and had been unable to do it. And he couldn't believe that this intern just out of college had sort of lucked into this job. And it was at that moment that I went, "Oh, I think I need to I appreciated it the whole time, but I said, I think I need to appreciate this even more, because apparently, as you said, this doesn't happen all the time."
Yeah. And I hope that our students understand that they have a more realistic viewpoint. But so what happened after after being at WMAQ, because you never have left the Chicago market? How did you move around?
So I was at WMAQ for about a year and a half, and it was really obvious that they were getting ready to change formats and go to the all sports format. Yeah. And everyone was going to be fired because they weren't going to need them in all news anymore. And so I started looking around, in a radio station called WLS, which was a top radio station at the time, was looking for a news reporter. And so I knew the news director, but I went through the whole process. Several other people did too. And in the end, they ended up hiring me and leave. And so I left WMAQ, which was really difficult because I love the station. I love the people. I'll never forget the one person, who will remain nameless, telling me that leaving WMAQ for WLS would be career suicide. They just couldn't believe that I was doing this. And so there are times that I want to run into that person again and just go, I'm still waiting for the death. It hasn't happened yet. But in a fluctuating market with people and companies changing hands all the time, and you have to, in that moment, really think about what works best for me and for my family. And in that time, I made the change, and WLS was just a fantastic radio station to work in. Great people. It was a news talk station, so it was different than all news, doing shorter reports, shorter newscasts. The talk shows were really the format, but just a wonderful opportunity to work with a great team of people in a really great newsroom. From WLS, I started getting the talk itch, where I was enjoying news, but I started going, these talk show hosts seem like they're having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to try that. And I was a sidekick on a couple of talk shows at WLS, but they would never give me my own talk show or let me be a key part of a talk show. And so I ended up having to leave to go to a radio station called WIND in Chicago, where I was part of a talk show with a great longtime Chicago broadcaster, John Howell, who's just still a dear friend. And we did a morning show for a few years. And then, ironically enough, I moved back to WLS, this time as a talk show host. So you almost had to leave in order to come back and do the thing. If you'd made me a talk show host, I never would have left.
Yeah.
But they had their reasons, and it's fine. And so I was a talk show host then at WLS again for quite a few years before, and students need to understand this, before I was fired for no reason, no cause. The ratings were great. I was number one in the time slot, and I was let go simply because the program director, who I'm still really good friends with, wanted to put someone else in that time slot. And in radio and TV, unlike accounting or plumbing or whatever, you can't just create another slot for somebody. You only have so much time in the day, and you can only have so many people on the air. And so they let me go, and they put this other talk show host in, and I was out of a job. And it was a weird feeling to say I'm having success, and yet I'm out of a job. Yeah. And yet I was. And I'm not the only one to go through that over the years. Lots of people have done that. So understand, students, you may lose a job, not because of poor performance or not even because of a financial cutback, but just because your boss wants someone else to have your job. And so I was out, and then I ended up at a radio station called WMBI, which is a religious broadcaster here in Chicago. And I worked there for a little while before ultimately getting the job back in 2014 here at WBBM. And I've been here ever since, and I don't want to go anywhere else.
So what kind of growth have you seen professionally? You talk a little bit about having the ability to do a talk show, which I'm sure a lot of students may watch this and think, well, I like to talk. Can I do that? How did you grow, and how are you able to do a talk show, to be a host of a show? What kind of skills do you need to have?
Yeah, the talk show, what many people believe, and this is people who are in other aspects of radio, in other formats, they assume radio is radio is radio. If I have a good voice, if I can talk, I can do any kind of radio.
Right.
And there's a huge difference between being a news broadcaster, being a talk show host, being a DJ. Those are just very, very different skills. I tried being a DJ, and I was horrible at it. I just couldn't do it. Talk show hosting, people assume, I like talking to my friends. We make each other laugh. I have interesting opinions. I can be a talk show host. And what they don't understand is there is a real skill. There is a way of being a talk show host that does not involve you just getting behind a microphone and talking. People think that it's like, hey, me and my buddies in a bar and we're hanging out and we're talking. But if anyone thinks about being in a bar and they overhear someone else's conversation, is that conversation ever interesting? No, except to the people who are in that conversation.
Right.
No one wants to listen to that. And so people assume, I can talk with my buddies and we have a great time. Being a talk show host involves developing skills where you say, I have to ask a question of the audience to get them interested. I have to make them laugh. I have to provide them with analysis or opinion that's interesting, that they're not going to get anywhere else. I'm setting up my segment so that I'm rolling out a story and giving some of the details, and then giving them an angle or a question to push back upon, and then telling them the phone number and waiting for their calls. And it's not just I get up here and talk and I'm interesting, and so people are going to listen to me. And when you're doing that talk show, not only do you have to roll out this topic in a specific way so that it's interesting and entertaining, but the whole time in the studio, you have all of these screens in front of you. You have papers that have some of your details about your story that you're talking about. You have a screen that has all of the phone callers. You have an internet screen where you may have some other details. You have a screen that has people who are texting in. You have a producer who may be talking in your ear or chatting on a chat screen. And you're having to keep track of all of these spinning plates while on the air, making it sound like the only thing you're focusing on is that listener. And
Yep.
you're talking directly to him or her. So it's a difficult skill, and I'm glad that I was able to do it, and I learned a lot. It's really hard. It's not just open up the microphone and talk and people will flock to me. It's not like that.
What I also appreciated, Cisco, is that when you've talked to our students, and my students specifically, you've talked about the importance of being a storyteller no matter what you're doing. And I think that's what I'm always impressed with, your ability to, whatever the subject is, it's like, I think of it like unpeeling an onion, or, something like that, to where there's so many layers of what you have to do to tell a story. Do you feel better is this something that you just continue to grow into as a storyteller?
Yeah, you need to do it not only to be a successful radio broadcaster or TV broadcaster. TV, you have the pictures that can help you tell the story, but you're still telling a story.
Yeah.
You're seeing it now in the rise of podcasts that are story podcasts, whether it's fiction or whether it's real life. You're seeing podcasts flourish where good storytellers are revealing good stories and rolling them out in compelling and creative and really interesting ways. You do that as you get your reps, as you are slowly but surely working through and growing. One of the keys for me has been I have a few people that I still, all these years later, rely on for feedback. Listen to me, critique my writing, critique my voice, my presentation. How am I doing? You never really get, at least you shouldn't get to a point where you say, I have arrived, I am good, I don't need any help. You're just constantly working on it. And for all these years, I've been doing that. I don't like being critiqued. I'm a little thin-skinned, right? I don't like being told I'm not doing something well.
Right. Yeah. That's natural.
And yet you need to do it.
Yeah.
And so I do. And it's helped me continue to grow, where I go, I didn't even realize I was doing that. And then you can fix it.
What kind of challenges and joys do you get from your job? Or, I'm sure over the years you've seen different things evolve, but what do you see as challenges and joys?
The challenge is just the changing industry. You've seen it, I think, ahead of time with newspapers, where the switch to digital, I don't want to say it killed newspapers, but what people don't understand is newspapers have had such a revenue loss from print that they have not been able to make up on digital. They put the same stories online, but they do not make as much money, not even nearly the same amount of money online as they do with print. And so it's putting that transition in technology is putting newspapers out of business. And the same thing is going on with radio and TV. You can broadcast online, you can stream all of your content, and yet the money that is spent on digital advertising is just a small fraction of what historically has been spent on over-the-air radio or TV. And so you have radio and TV contracting financially, not hugely, but they're contracting enough to where Wall Street and owners are saying, is this really viable? It's no longer a growth industry. They will say digital is where it is, podcasting is where it is, streaming is where it is. And yet they can't make the same money doing that. And so radio and TV, they're really at this crossroads of trying to figure out what they're going to be and how they're going to stay relevant. And so that's the biggest challenge, is really seeing a path forward in the future. For me, I'm in my mid 40s. Maybe I have 20 more years if I'm lucky. But for a student who's just starting out, who may have 40 or 50 years, really navigating that, I think, is going to be difficult. Not impossible. I don't want to dissuade anyone from getting into this business. I think there's still a lot of life for people who are good storytellers, but it is a changing landscape. The joy is the fact that I get to come to work every day and do what I love. I love broadcasting. I always have, knowing that in the news format, that there are people out there listening to you, getting the information that they need to get through their day. You're their companion of sorts. I mean, that's really gratifying. And so to be able to have a job you love and do it every day and do it in your hometown, it's just kind of overwhelming. I mean, it really is great joy.
Well, it's obvious that you've always had this passion, and it's, it really has moved. It's almost like a spiritual movement in directing your life. And I'm very happy and certainly proud of all that you've achieved, Cisco. And I know that WIU is always been foremost in your thoughts. You've come back numerous times. I want to say thank you. I mean, Cisco has come back to Macomb, spoken at our classes. Of course, virtually you've met as well. And I've always appreciated all that you've done for our program, because you understand the importance of how important our students who need to have that sort of inspiration. So our last kind of thing is to say, what kind of recommendations do you have for somebody that hasn't heard from you yet? What kind of recommendations do you have for a student?
Yeah, continue, as we discussed earlier, continue taking advantage of any opportunity that you have, even an opportunity you can dig up yourself, to actually get your reps in doing broadcasting. Make your mistakes when you're in college. Okay, it's much easier to get docked a little bit of a grade than it is to have a boss say you may get fired.
Right.
So go ahead. Any radio, TV, digital opportunity that you have, take advantage of it. That's super important. The other thing is, and this, I think, for someone who's 20 years old is probably less groundbreaking or even necessary than someone who's maybe a little older. Digital is where it's at. So get ready to be a multimedia journalist. I know WIU focuses on this. That really is what's going on in the industry. Our radio reporters are going out on a story, gathering tape, writing and producing stories for the radio, tweeting about it, and also putting together podcast stuff for them to put on the website and our digital streams. Our company's app takes a lot of our information, or a lot of our stories. You are going to be a one-person band multimedia journalist if you are going to have a future in this industry. And if you're willing to do that, you can have a long and successful career. It could be very joy-filled. But just understand, you're not going to go in and just sort of sit at an anchor desk on TV or in radio. You're not going to be a reporter who only tells the stories and producers and camera people handle everything else. No, you're really one person who's going to be handling it all. And if you're willing to do that, you can get some great opportunities in big markets like Chicago. Even when you're young, you don't have to be 30 in order to get to Chicago. You can get there earlier if you're willing to do that. And so hopefully lots of WIU students will be able to do that.
Well, thanks for that encouragement, Cisco. And thank you also for your time. Greatly appreciate it. It's always great to see you and hear how things are going.
Thanks, Buzz. Good to talk with you.
And thanks to all of our weekly viewers out there. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, or you have somebody that you would like to recommend, just send me an email. We like to hear from our alums. And we hope that you will continue to watch and listen to the podcast, and really appreciate everyone's support. So until next week, stay safe, take care, and God bless.